Hello, my friends. My name is Jack Descartes, and this is Sentinel Circle. Thank you for being here today. We're going to go ahead and go back to time, or back in time, I should say. We're going to go ahead and read this article. This is from the New York Times, the opinion pages, it's an op-ed titled Men Who Needs Them by Greg Hamkin, and is published back in 2012. The reason why I picked this article, even though it's a very old article in the grand scheme of things, it's over 13 years old. Yes, 13 years old. I wanted to bring this up because I want to remind people what, and I'm sure everybody knows, but I still want to remind people why people like me exist is because of articles like this. You know, there were articles that hated on men quite a bit back in the day. So we'll go ahead and read this and see where it winds up. So it says mammals are named after their defining characteristics. The glands capable of sustaining a life for years after birth, glands that are functional only in the female. And yet, while the term mammal is based on an objective analysis of shared traits, the genus name for human beings, Homo, reflects an 18th century masculine bias in science. That bias, however, is becoming harder to sustain as men become less relevant to both reproduction and parenting. This is why I picked this article, because it's basically going to say that men do not need to be involved in child rearing. And I'm going to basically smack this article writer upside the head with, you're wrong. So, women aren't just becoming men's equals. It's increasingly clear that mankind itself is a gross misnomer. An uninterrupted, intimate, and essential maternal connection defines our species. The central behaviors of mammals revolve around how we bear and raise our young, and humans are the parenting champions of the class. In the United States, for nearly 20% of our lifespan, we are considered the legal responsibility of our parents. That doesn't really mean that we're, parenting world champions. Just saying. With expanding our reproductive choices, we can expect to see more women choose to reproduce without men entirely. Okay. That hasn't happened in 13 years, but sure. Fortunately, the data for children raised by only females is encouraging. Okay. I will say that it's shown that male only relationships have not been successful either. It's yin and yang. You need both in order to join up and become whole. Let's see here. As the Princeton sociologist, and of course it's a sociologist, Sarah S. Lanahan, has shown poverty is what hurts children, not the number or gender of parents. Well, no. We got a whole thing on not what children look like when they don't have fathers in the house. This is very dishonest. Very dishonest. That's good, since women are both necessary and sufficient for reproduction, and men are neither. Are you enjoying this article yet? Because I'm enjoying it. From the production of the first cell, the egg, to the development of the fetus and the birth and breastfeeding of the child, fathers can be absent. They can be at work, at home, in prison, or at war, living or dead. Okay, so I understand what he's getting at. And yes, like, men don't really come into the picture for children until later on. We are the foundation, whereas the women are the nurturing side. You know, the child has to have a developed brain to understand the lessons from the father. So we'll go ahead and continue on. Like, I'm already hating this article, but there's a point to this. Think about your own history. Your life as an egg actually started in your mother's developing ovary before she was born. You were wrapped in your mother's fetal body as it developed within your grandmother. After the two of you left grandma's womb, you enjoyed the protection of your mother's prepubescent ovary. Then sometime between 12 and 50, after the two of you left your grandmother, you burst forth and were sucked by her, oh Lord, fimbrae. Yeah, fimbrae. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know these terms, okay? But I know fallopian. Into the fallopian tube. You glided along the oviduct, surviving happily on the stored nutrients and genetic message that mom packed for you. Then at some point, your father spent a few minutes close by, but then left. Okay. A little while later, you encouraged some very odd tiny cells that he had shed. They did not merge with you or give you any cell membranes or nutrients. Just oh my God. Infinitesimally small packet of DNA, less than 1/millionth of your mass. Over the next 9 months, you stole minerals from your mother's bone and oxygen from her blood, and you received all your nutrients, energy, and immune protection from her. By the time you were born, your mother had contributed 6 to 8 pounds of your weight. Then, as a parting gift, she swathed you in billions of bacteria from her birth canal and groin that continued to protect your skin, digestive system, and general health. In contrast, your father's 3.3 pictograms of DNA come out to less than 1 pound of male contribution since the beginning of Homo sapiens 107 billion babies ago. So I will say that there have been studies that show that there might be a situation, keyword there might be, I'm sure more studies needed, but there might be a situation where the woman's her immune system does attack male embryos and fetuses because they see it as a foreign entity, whereas a female embryo will not be attacked as much by the human body. I don't know how accurate that is. That to me does not make sense. I'm sure that it's one of those things where they saw it happen one time, therefore they think that it happens all the time. And it could be more of like a medical condition rather than a fact, like just a fact of life. You know, in our massive universe, an infinite of possibilities can happen. And who was it? It was not Schrodinger. It was basically the theory is unless you can observe something 100% of the time, there always exists an exception, right? There always exists kind of like something can completely change your understanding of something, you know. So that's why I'm very hesitant to say that, like, that this is, the female body will attack male embryo, simply because, again, to me that doesn't make sense. But because there would be like other signs, like, maybe a male embryo or fetus, I should say. Maybe there's a case of more like natural abortions on a male versus a female. I don't know. Like I said, that doesn't make sense to me. Like it just sounds more like, and I'm sure it's not a situation where the body attacks it to the point of death. It just, the body doesn't know or whatever. But like I said, I don't believe that for a second. Okay, so let's continue. And while birth seems like a separation, for us mammals, it's just a new form of attachment to our female parents. If your mother breastfed you, as our own species has done for nearly our entire existence, then you suckled from her all your water, protein, sugar, fats, and even immune protection. She sampled your diseases by holding you close and kissing you, just as your father might have done, but unlike your father, she's responded to your infections by making antibodies that she passed to you in breast milk. That's an interesting tidbit, and I would be curious to know if that's actually true. And if that, because there have been studies that shown that babies fed by formula are actually worse off than by breastfeeding, and that's kind of why, one of the many reasons why I absolutely hate Nestle. I try my hardest not to buy any Nestle products because of the whole, they pushed formula onto babies in Africa, to new mothers, right? And then when they stopped producing milk, they stopped giving them the formula and charged them an arm and a leg. Unless you absolutely cannot, definitely breastfeed your child. It is absolutely important. We've survived as a species for, it said here for millions of years. It said 107 billion, but that's the amount of babies. But we survived as a species for millions of years without formula. Formula is a very recent thing. So like I said, you should breastfeed your children, because it provides so much more than just nutrition. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is a man that wrote this. I don't dismiss the years I put in as a doting father, or my years at home as a oh God. Or my years at home as a house husband with 2 young kids, and I credit my own father as the more influential parent in my life. Fathers are of great benefit, but it is a far cry from necessary and sufficient for reproduction. Well, okay, guy, like, when you're just talking about reproduction, then yes, all right, you can get by with, a mother and a deadbeat dad, but that's not the point, sir. And this is kind of the issue, is these men like Greg here, they have no idea the power of a male role model in a child. And I'm not saying just in a male child's life. I'm talking about both male and female. They have a very significant impact on how well a child does. And this article here, we need to talk about luxury beliefs one day, because that's what this article is it's a luxury belief. He would never have children with a woman and then just disappear. He would always be in the picture, but he's encouraging others, saying you don't need a man in your life. Having a man in your life, that's sexist. Get rid of the man. But studies have shown time and time again that having a man in a child's life is more influential in how that child will do in their life than anything else. Okay? If a woman wants to have a baby without a man, she just needs to secure sperm, fresh or frozen, from a donor, living or dead. This is true. The only technology that self-impregnating women need is a straw or a turkey baster, and the basic technique hasn't changed much since Talmudic scholars debated the religious implications of insemination without intercourse in the 5th century. The turkey baster, the good old turkey baster. My father's a turkey baster. God, Lord. Okay. I'm done screwing around. If all the men on Earth died tonight, the species could continue on frozen sperm. If the women disappear, it's extinction. No, that's not true. If all the men disappeared, that it would be an extinction level event. It may continue on for a little bit longer, okay, but it still would be an extinction level event, unless you're saying that the women would produce newer men, which if that's the case, then okay, yeah, there would be propagation of the species. Okay. Ultimately, the question is, does mankind really need men? With human cloning technologies just around the corner and enough frozen sperm in the world to already populate many generations, perhaps we should perform a cost-benefit analysis. Okay, yeah. It's true that men have traditionally been the breadwinners, but women have been a majority of college graduates since the 1980s, and their numbers are growing. Here we go. It's also true that men have, on average, a bit more muscle mass. just a bit more. Just a wee bit more. I can tell that Greg has a bit more muscle mass than his wife. But the age of ubiquitous weapons, the ones that with better firepower and the knowledge of the law, triumphs. Meanwhile, women live longer and are healthier and are far less likely to commit a violent offense. If men were cars, who would buy the model that doesn't last as long, is given to lethal incidences, and ends up impounded more often? Recently, the geneticist J. Craig Venter showed that the entire genetic material of an organism can be synthesized by a machine and then put into what he called an artificial cell. This was actually a bit of press release hyperbole. Mr. Venter started with a fully functional cell, then swapped out its DNA. In doing so, he unwittingly demonstrated that the female component of reproduction, the egg cell, cannot be manufactured, but the male can. When I explained this to a female colleague and asked her if she thought there was yet anything irreplaceable about men, she answered, "They're entertaining." Well, I'm glad that I'm I can be relegated to the circus monkey. Gentlemen, let's hope that's enough. Greg Hamkin is a professor of biology and criminal justice at Boise State University and the director of the Idaho Innocence Project. Of course he is. As we've seen time and time again, that the Innocence Project is a scam. You know, yeah, this dude is a grade A. I'm gonna say it, a grade A anus. I don't like the guy, and quite frankly, I hope he leads the pack in showing the world that we don't need men. I hope he knows what I'm talking about. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and take a break and come back with comments and final thoughts. So stay right there. We'll be right back. Thank you. Hello, my friends. Jack Descartes here once again. Thank you for watching this video. We appreciate it. I just would like to take a few moments of your time. Right now, we are currently raising money to host a website. We have Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, as well as a Patreon in case you'd like to donate once or you'd like to give a continued donation. The donation on the Patreon is only $3 a month. Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal, you can donate however much you want. There is no obligation. I will continue to try to provide as much content for free as possible. Once the website is up, we will use that as a hub for all Sentinel Circle related activities, including local meetups, as well as online meetups, online discussions, and videos. So again, if you could go and donate to either Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, or Patreon, all the links are in the description. We appreciate everything you have done for us. And if you can't donate, we still ask that you like, subscribe, and share. All these activities do help even in the most insignificant ways. If you do donate, you will be immortalized in our videos and the website. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Now back to our scheduled program. Thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. We're going to go right into comments. So first one is from Shar Aznable. He said, damn, was too tired from work yesterday and fell asleep. I missed Hammer 2. Gonna watch it today. Well, Shar, I gotta say, I appreciate you making the attempt. I appreciate you wanting to watch later on. I'm very appreciative of your friendship, of being here, being active with the channel. You're a good guy, and I am just thankful that you're at least thinking about me. I hope you're doing well, and I hope everything in life is going okay for you. So thank you again. Next one, Collapse of Civilization. I didn't contribute much, but thanks for letting me hang out, LOL. Well, I know, I was kind of surprised that you didn't talk that much, but you know, it was your first time being on there. You're probably a little nervous. I could have probed you a little bit more. That's fine. I just hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something. And I hope you realize that there are a lot of like-minded individuals out there. You just got to go find them. And I know, like, doing the whole YouTube thing, it's not the greatest thing in the world. I know. I got to say, for those who don't know, Collapse of Civilization, he recently shut down his YouTube channel. I've seen some of the videos he had on there. They were very well done, very well put together. He's a very good artist. It's just, I think people don't appreciate the message he was trying to convey, and I hope that in the future he can come back with a new format. I think if he had a different format, he probably would thrive. But, you know, sometimes maybe it's just not meant to be. Either way, I appreciate you being there. Collapse of Civilization. Thank you. Nick, this again was under the video of Adulting 101. He says, these people haven't heard of YouTube ? And this is a very good point. I will say that during the research I did for the Adulting 101 video, it seemed to me, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but it seemed to me that a lot of people are expecting the information to be handed to them rather than wanting to go out to seek that information. And in a way, I'm guilty of that too. I'm full stop. I can be guilty of that too. I expect knowledge to be handed to me, and I just got to seek out the knowledge. The knowledge is out there. The internet has shown that the knowledge is so easily accessible and all that stuff, but maybe what it boils down to is there's so much, because, okay, let's just take a quick example. I am not the best cleaner. You know, I'm trying my hardest to be a better cleaner. I've bought like Martha Stewart's book, the big book on how to clean, and I'll show you. It's like, you know, big chunky boy like that. But I didn't want to pull out that book and go through the book and try and find, because they all try and do these like natural remedies to clean, and I needed something a little more heavy duty. right? I just need to know kind of what chemical to do to clean a sink, you know? And the problem that I ran into was I found, this is an exaggeration, but it was like 50 different articles, each saying 50 different things. And I think that's what it really boils down to is a lot of people don't want to spend money on something that may not work. And we're getting overwhelmed. Like, what's that show, Hoarders? I think that's what it gets to. It gets to a point where I do believe that hoarding is a mental illness. I'm not saying it isn't, but there's a point where it becomes so overwhelming that the mind just shuts down because it's so overwhelmed. And I think that's what it really boils down to is people are so overwhelmed with all the knowledge of the world that they can't handle it, right? Like, let's take, days of old, right? In fact, okay, so here's a good one. King of the Hill had this episode where Peggy was writing this column in a newspaper where she was like giving people cleaning tips, but she was like the worst person to ask. So she was getting the information from Min, her Khan's wife, the next door neighbor, and the last article she wrote, she talked about mixing chlorine and ammonia to create mustard. She was saying that, you can combine both of them to have a strong cleaning agent. And Hank realized, no, that's mustard gas. And you basically told the whole town to make poison. Point being is that the newspaper at the time was like the ultimate authority of, what is and what isn't. And, it kind of showed that, you really don't know who's writing these articles for the newspaper. What's the difference between a guy like me and a guy that's getting paid to do something like what I'm doing? There really isn't much. We're just all kind of flailing around. But, newspaper has that sense of authority, right? And a lot of people will get their tips from like newspapers and stuff like that. But now, with all the videos out there, you got people that, make like, just videos. There's no production value behind it. And then you got people that put a ton of production value behind it. And they're both saying either the same thing or two different things. It's a lot of information to parse through. And a lot of people just don't have that time, But, it goes back to the whole situation, which is, a book's kind of the same deal. You got to get the book, look it up, all that stuff. So I think what it boils down to is there's so much information out there. We don't know what's true and what's not. And it's like what Homefront says is you don't know what you don't know. I think that's what he says. Something like that. You can't expect someone to know what they don't know. That's what it boils down to. So I think Nick's kind of got a good point, but I see the inverse of that argument, which is a lot of people just don't know how to. And that's the one thing I'm noticing, especially with the younger generation, is the research skill is becoming kind of like it's disappearing. Especially now with the takeover of AI, I'm sure a lot of people are going to AI and saying, how do I clean this? How do I clean that? How do I do this? How do I do that? Maybe there's a renaissance that's going to happen with certain skills. Maybe not. Maybe it's what it boils down to is just human laziness. I don't know. I don't know the answer to these questions, but it's going to, the next couple of years are going to be interesting. In fact, this next year is probably going to be interesting. We shall see. Anyways, good comment, Nick. I appreciate it. Oh, Rusty Rivers. He says, awesome. All right. All right, Rusty. Singletown. He says a naughty word, so we'll just blank that naughty word out. He says, and I don't give a S anymore. I'm out of this race to the bottom at the tender age of 58. I just say no. No to wasting my time on low effort women and low effort PhD who thinks she is the queen of Saba. He makes very good points. Like, again, we just did that aggravating article from the New York Times that everybody's been doing, and that was one of the topics she brought up. Where are the men who are willing to put in the effort? Well, right here. The woman's at the age of 52. At that age, men are just tired. They're tired of putting in effort when they're not getting anything in return. So they say, screw it, throw up their hands and just do their own thing. And we're seeing it happen younger and younger. It used to be the oops. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. It used to be the whole trope of the midlife crisis. Man, he gets to a certain age and he buys a new car, or, a new sports car, or he gets like a boat or whatever. I think men are kind of like saying, you know what? Why does that have to be midlife? Why can't that just be my life? Why can't I just buy the nice car now? Why can't I go take the nice trip now? Why do I have to wait until I'm in my 60s to enjoy those things and then get mocked for that stuff? You only live, when I was young, the whole thing was YOLO. You only live once, and then people were dying, and then we were all like, yeah, you really do only live once. But like, I don't mean to go off in a tangent. I may just do like a simple sit down video talking about this in the future. But this brings up a very good point. Even now at my age, I look back at my 20s and I'm like, what did I do? I did nothing for my 20s, and I honestly feel that I've wasted my 20s doing the right thing. I don't want to sit there and say that I did the wrong thing, but when I went through my legal issues, I saw a path that I wanted nothing to do with ever again. I got dragged in because, growing up as an adult, hang on, before we do this, that's the last comment anyways. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to switch over to my face. We'll finish up with this comment and then we'll go into final thoughts. So growing up, I was the good kid in class. I did my homework. I didn't get into trouble. I didn't sneak out. I did nothing. I was like that stereotypical good kid. Okay. And I did what I would argue was the right things, stayed in school, even though I hated it. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink. I did like nothing, I didn't even smoke a cigarette, nothing. Like I was like, I followed the rules to the letter. And in a way, I'm still kind of like that. Right. And, the one thing I did was I fell for a person, and I shouldn't have fallen for that person. In hindsight, obviously. So how do I want to say this? So what did that get me? Well, that got me 8 weeks in jail. That got me a ruined career, promising career. I didn't really get a chance to really dive into it. And when I say career, I don't want to talk about it too much. But it was a start to something better. I'm a very intelligent person. I don't mean like I'm rubbing it in everyone's face. It's more just I went to school for engineering. I when I take tests, for certain things, I always perform above everybody. I'm a straight A student, and all that stuff. It was just my biggest issue, and I will say this, as just me talking to you, during school, I was bored. I was bored, and that kind of worked against me. And then, like I said, I got to college and I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. And that really kind of set me down the path I'm in now. But my point is, though, I was a very straight-laced individual. And what it got me was, not only did it not really help me in the grand scheme of things, but it actually, in a way, destroyed my life. And I saw a pathway that I was being dragged down, and I realized I didn't want a part of that either. So what it boils down to is, I think, 2008 was kind of like an awakening unlike any other, because a lot of the people that I graduated with, they really didn't have, well, no, I graduated in 2007. So I got to think about this. Give me a second. I would say that a lot of the people that I went to school with, because 2008 didn't happen yet. They had a lot of ideas and promises. They were in college or in whatever the heck they were doing when it collapsed. Okay. And I think that was when 2008 happened, and then Occupy Wall Street happened almost immediately after that. I really do think that Occupy Wall Street was that pushback against 2008, because we saw 2008 happen. We saw, a lot of people my age saw their parents lose their livelihood, their house, all that stuff. Okay. A lot of people who were promised the ability to go to college couldn't for various reasons, and I think a lot of people got bitter for that. But here's the other step to that, which is, a lot of the older kids, they have younger siblings. The younger siblings saw that too. Okay. And I think, with the advent of the internet, there was this rage, but I don't think it got channeled correctly until only recently, because I've been on YouTube in some capacity since 2010. Okay. We talk about the internet of old. Well, there wasn't really a lot of political commentary in the internet of old. It only started happening around the election of Obama. And I know I'm still on his comment. I gotta get off of it and start with final thoughts. But I really think that that was the start of it. Was Obama kind of tapped into it, but it got unleashed under Trump, and that's kind of where we're at right now with his comment, which was, I'm out of the race to the bottom at the tender age of 58. Not wasting my time on low effort women. So I honestly think that when it got unleashed, especially under Trump, because Obama kind of unleashed the left side, people my age who are on the left saying, okay, we're going to take a radical option. And I do think that, we always talk about the political pendulum. It swung back hard because it swung one way hard. When you really think about it, what did Obama do? Which was, he really did change the United States in a way that's never, we got gay marriage out of it. We got a lot of the craziness out of Obama, and we're still dealing with that fallout. So when the pendulum swung hard the other way, and then it became the Republicans' turn to really unleash themselves, I think the left kind of had a collective meltdown because they didn't realize, they thought people would just kind of take it on the chin, and that's not the case. And then of course we wind up with the whole targeting children for gender reassignment surgery, all that stuff, and it really did spark something bad. I will say that I'm seeing more and more comments saying that the slippery slope is real and all that stuff. So maybe we should do a video on it, because this is getting to 20 minutes now and I haven't even touched final thoughts yet. So let's go ahead and we'll just do final thoughts on this article. Okay, so Greg is a jerk. I don't like him, and I hope he stubs his toe every single night for the rest of his life. Like, he is an awful individual. The problem that I see with people like Greg, because again, he says himself, he's a professor of biology and criminal justice at Boise State University, the director of the Idaho Innocence Project. So already he's got a mark against him. He's the president or the director of the Idaho Innocence Project. I personally don't like the Innocence Project. Anybody who's familiar with Joe Rogan saw the episode where they got the one guy who actually did commit the murder out. They got him out on a technicality, and then I think like less than a month later, he had someone chopped up in his apartment or something like that. Like, it was not a good look for the Innocence Project. But the problem that I have with the Innocence Project is they go after anybody whom they feel that they can get out, regardless of how overwhelming the evidence may have been against that person. And I do firmly believe that, okay, if something procedural was done that landed that person in jail and it was obvious that they didn't do it, okay, I can respect that. The problem is the Innocence Project is, and this is the inherent problem with all these projects or NGOs, whatever. They are hammers in search of nails. And even if the object is not a nail, they will treat it with a nail or treat it like a nail. And that leads to situations where, of course, you got the guy who wound up having another guy chopped up in his apartment. So already I don't like him. Okay. Then on top of that, he's basically making an argument saying that, women are doing good, so therefore we need to get rid of men, And the guy is inherently a man. Where was it? Hang on, I got to find this part here. He talked about he talked about being a stay-at-home dad, a house husband, how he put it. Yeah, right here. I don't dismiss the years I put in as a doting father or my years at home as a house husband with 2 young kids. He already kind of pointed out the flaw in his argument. He's got there's 2 parents at the house. Okay. I do firmly believe that there should be at minimum 1 parent in a household raising the young children. Older children, they're independent. They don't need both parents there. They don't need 1 parent there. They just, but it would be nice to have 1 parent there to take care of them. But what he doesn't understand, though, is society is built on the backs of men. And this is always the problem with these articles, and this is specifically why I picked this specific article. He's only approaching it from one direction, which is the reproduction question, which, okay, at a inherent biological level, yes, men are not needed. We've proven or we've done studies where we've taken bone marrow from a woman and used it to start the cell dividing process in an egg. You know, you don't really need like a sperm to do that, and you know, in a sense, women don't need man for biological processes. But the problem is that's ignoring the plethora of other reasons why men need to exist. You know, Aaron Clary's book, A World Without Men, showed that, you know, women will not do the work that men do. I would disagree with Aaron Clary as well. There are women that do those jobs. It's just they don't actively seek it out, and I don't blame them. Like, I do not seek out being a plumber. You know, even though they make a lot of money compared to what I make, I don't want to be, you know, diving in the doo-doo. And that's kind of the whole point, is there are certain jobs that men do that women will not do. And there are also jobs that men do that women physically cannot do. I'm sure if push came to shove, women will do certain jobs. Like if let's say all the men died tomorrow, okay, the women would pick up some of the slack, but it would be a far cry from where they're currently at. Okay. What I mean by that is, like, I do see women driving trash trucks. Not very many, it's mostly men, but I do see that. Whereas women tend to congregate in office jobs. You know, they're in the air conditioning all day. You know, they'll do those jobs. I don't see a point where women would do those jobs. I mean, we've seen what is it's Bear Grylls, his show. We actually saw the they did the whole men team versus women team. The women needed a lot of help. The men barely scraped by, but the women needed a lot of help to even come close to where the men were. It's not a question of do they lack the ability to do it? Women could do it. It's more I think it really boils down to priorities. You know, men kind of understand certain priorities like shelter, food, clothing, that kind of stuff. Women don't. You know, like, they were so focused on, like, the whole pig thing. Let's talk about that freaking pig. They were starving, and instead of taking the pig and slaughtering it to feed them, they started feeding the pig and kept it as a pet. They didn't see it as food, whereas the men, they freaking got an alligator or a crocodile or whatever the thing. It was a caiman. That's what it was. They got a caiman. You know, it was dangerous, and they got it and they slaughtered it for food because they were hungry. You know. Meanwhile, like the women, like they separated themselves. They had one group stay behind doing nothing, while the other group scouted ahead. Whereas the men, they all went together. You know, and then the women got lost, and they were all. It was a disaster from start to finish. I don't know if, like, because it's reality TV. I know, you know, like, when it comes to casting, they pick certain tropes for certain, you know, just because it's reality, it doesn't mean it's reality. It's more just, you know, like, there was that whole conversation. Would you rather be in the woods with a bear or a man? And, like, women were saying, oh, I'd rather be in the woods with a bear. Well, I would rather be in the woods myself with a bear than a woman. Because at least with the bear, like, you know what the bear is going to do. It's going to try and kill you. A woman, in my view, would probably get me killed. You know, they would really not contribute much. They would whine the entire time. I mean, like a lot. A lot of this article just screams like this dude lives such a comfortable life that he feels that women could take over tomorrow, and that it's a luxury belief. That's really what this is. It's a belief that's so idiotic, so insane that only an intellectual can have it. I really do believe that as people get more and more educated, they have no idea how society works. And because of that, they have these dangerous views of life and society and everything. And it's horrifying. These people are professors. They're teaching our kids. This guy is a professor in biology and criminal justice, and he holds these beliefs. That to me is scary. He's using statistics. I mean, he mentioned he compared men and women as cars. Why would you invest in a car that fails sooner than the other model, is more deadly and gets locked up more often? Like that's basically what he's saying is, why should we have men when they're more dangerous? And we've shown time and time again that men who don't have fathers in the house tend to break the law more, tend to be more violent. And he's completely glossing over that fact. In fact, he said that it's poverty that's the problem, not the other way around. Well, we can't even trust the data at this point because we've shown that there's inherent bias when it comes to studies. If you can't even trust the data that's being produced and published, then how can you trust the data that relies on that data? How can you trust the conclusions that rely on that data? You can't. Education, research, all these things have become so politicized at this point that I think that basically I would say that everything that we've produced study-wise since the 1960s is tainted. We've shown that it goes back even further. I mean, there have been quote-unquote studies that show that smoking is good for your health, and obviously we've shown that it's not now, which I'm sure there's some benefit to smoking pure tobacco versus smoking cigarettes because of all the fillers in cigarettes. I know that there's been discussions that it's not tobacco, it's actually the paper that causes all that stuff. And if you smoked tobacco from a pipe, it's actually healthier. There's a lot of different things, and that's what I'm trying to say is we're drawing conclusions from a very limited set of data when we're ignoring all these other aspects here. And I think it's getting to a point where we're endangering ourselves as a species because of it. But the reason why I brought this article was to show that this is what we're going through isn't new. This has been going on, like I said, even back as far as 2012, and I'm sure it's back even further than that. It was just, I saw this article. I thought it was very interesting. I wanted to present it to you because I want to show that, even men hold these views. That itself is disgraceful and abhorrent. And this man has children. How radicalized are his children going to be? Anyways, I'm going to end it here since I'm at 32 minutes now. And that whole comment really kind of sent me into a whole tangent that I did not want to go down. I hope you enjoyed everything that I had to say here. Like I said, this article was a huge can of worms. I gotta start writing this stuff down because there's so much I want to talk about on these articles and stuff that I try my hardest not to make it a 2 hour, 3 hour video, but like I would like to talk about this stuff. So maybe that's what we'll do, is we'll just start having discussions on this. So anyways, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and share the videos as well. That's very helpful. But even if just as much as liking and commenting helps, any little bit helps. It takes a couple seconds. And if you watch this whole video, even if you watch a chunk of this video, like, you can spare a couple seconds. Anyways, I hope you have a good day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.